Today, part 2 of the National Park Service presentation before the Hawaii County Council on the contentious Keauhou Aquifer Water Management Area designation. In our previous installment, we were given a history of the Koloko-Honokahau National Park Unit and prevailing water law in Hawaii. Today, park officials present the science behind the growing aquifer concerns.
My name is Paula Cotillo, and I'm a hydrologist for the National Park Service, and I help parks all over the country protect their water resources. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today about what we're doing to protect water resources in the park. I've worked with Koloko-Honokahau National Historical Park for the past 7 years on this issue. I've participated in the groundwater working groups. I've attended, I think, all but one of the Kona Water Roundtable meetings. And I try to maintain a active collaboration with my peers, local consultants, scientists, and researchers to be up to date on the current state of knowledge in the hydrology of this aquifer system. And having a national perspective, I just wanted to add that I know that there's some concern that this is potentially controversial, that there's a lot of attention being paid to water issues, and I just wanted to say that it's been my experience that this is not unusual, that people are very passionate about their water, and that it's, I think it's not something to be scared of, and it's a great conversation, I think, that we're having. Okay, so as you've heard today, the Koloko-Honokahau is rich in cultural and natural resources. And the water resources in this area support traditional and customary practices, and they provide habitat for native fish and wildlife and plants. And the mission of the park is unique in the national park system. It's to preserve traditional native Hawaiian activities and culture. And fresh, clean groundwater is essential to this mission. And so for the next 20 minutes, what I would like to do is summarize the information that we used to determine that water resources in this area are threatened by groundwater withdrawals. And I'll talk about the resources themselves, the potential threats to those resources, and the potential consequences of reducing groundwater flow to the coast. And then I'd also like to just address again why we cannot wait for serious impacts to occur before acting. And I understand that this is a lot of new information, and I would just ask you to keep in mind that everything I talk about today is described in a lot more detail in our petition, and that we are all available anytime to follow up with you if you have questions or concerns after you've had some time to think about this. Okay, so the water resources in the park, they include the coral reef, tide pools, fish ponds, ancholine pools, and wetlands. And groundwater flow to these resources creates estuary-like conditions that support public trust resources, the traditional and customary practices, and native aquatic species. Okay, as the people who live in this area, fish in this area and swim, as they know, the groundwater that discharges to the nearshore waters, is colder than seawater. And this is a thermal infrared image. This is from the University of Hawaii. And red is warmer seawater, blue and green is colder groundwater. And you can see it discharging into ponds and pools along the coast. If you look on the right side of this figure, you'll see that these researchers also identified 31 major groundwater plumes along the Kona coast in this area. Okay, the salinity, or the groundwater that discharges to this area is also fresher than seawater, lower in salinity. And this image is from the U.S. Geological Survey. And what they show is, well, this is, the red is salt water, and the blue is fresher groundwater. And what they found is that salinity increases with depth in the ponds and pools in the park, and also the nearshore waters. Okay, so colder, fresher water discharges along the coast. This groundwater also carries nutrients to the coastal waters. And this is nutrient data from the University of Hawaii. And from this data, the researchers there have determined that the groundwater that discharges along the coast is a mixture of upland water and seawater. And this water discharges it flows into the coral reef in the park. The park has a beautiful coral reef in the ecosystem in the nearshore waters. It provides habitat for multiple species of fish. And the University of Hawaii found that one of the threats to the coral reef is nutrient loading from fertilizers and wastewater. There are tide pools in the park. They contain brackish water, and they attract a variety of marine life. They provide nursery habitat for juvenile fish and really good growing conditions for limu. And the University of Hawaii found that one native species of limu grows best in brackish water. And as salinity increases, the productivity decreases. And these researchers concluded that reducing groundwater flow to the coast could limit the productivity and distribution of limu in the nearshore waters. There are over 185 alkaline pools in the park. And they also contain brackish water. They provide habitat for culturally important species like opaiula, and for rare native species like the orange-black Hawaiian damselfly. This damselfly was once the most abundant damselfly in the Hawaiian Islands, and its population has been severely limited due to habitat loss. And researchers at the University of Hawaii and the U.S. Geological Survey, they found that the damselfly eggs cannot survive in salt water, and they concluded that reducing groundwater flow to the coast could further jeopardize one of the few remaining populations of this candidate endangered species. This is Aimakapa fish pond, and it provides habitat for two endangered water birds, the Hawaiian coot and the Hawaiian stilt. And the Fish and Wildlife Service found that reducing groundwater flow to the coast could limit the availability of food and habitat for these protected birds. And this is Koloko Fish Pond, where we were this morning. And traditional fish ponds were located where fresh water discharges to the coast, because this fresh water, as Sally explained this morning, it provides a nursery habitat, a protective habitat for juvenile fish, culturally important fish like the striped mullet. And the Department of Aquatic Resources found that reducing groundwater flow could affect habitat for the native striped mullet. Okay, so colder, fresher groundwater discharges to ponds and pools along the coast and in Kolokohonokohau. And protecting this groundwater is important because this water supports public trust resources, and it is the source of drinking water for Kona. And I think it's important to recognize that this aquifer is vulnerable to contamination from the surface and saltwater intrusion from the coast. And so next I want to talk about the factors that contribute to saltwater intrusion. Okay, here's the park within the Kona urban area as defined in the Kona Community Development Plan. And land use has changed rapidly around the park since it was established, and future growth is planned for this area. The question we have raised is, where will the water come from for this future development? And this is a map. The gray area is the outline of the Keauhou aquifer system. And the black circles are pumping wells. And pumping has more than doubled since the park was established, and there are now wells within the ahupua'a of the park. That's the pink shaded area. The blue area on the map is proposed development just in the area of the park. And these developments are targeting upland and coastal groundwater for their developments. Most recently, the Kolokomakai EIS proposed to withdraw up to 11 million gallons per day upgrading of the park. Okay, so how do groundwater withdrawals affect the coastal aquifer system? So in coastal systems, groundwater wells capture water that would otherwise flow to the coast. And this can lower water levels at the coast, causes salt to move inland and up in elevation. So that is saltwater intrusion. And saltwater intrusion has been observed in the aquifer system. This is monitoring data from a municipal well about 8 miles to the south of here. And there's just a couple points I want to make about this chart. It shows that saltwater intrusion or adverse impacts have occurred at a pumping rate below 4 million gallons per day. So that pumping rate is well below the sustainable yield of the aquifer system. The sustainable yield is 38 million gallons per day. And the sustainable yield is an aquifer-wide maximum pumping limit. And the point I want to emphasize is that adverse impacts can occur at pumping rates below the sustainable yield. And that's because the location of wells relative to the coast and relative to other resources is really important, and it must be considered when you're managing these withdrawals. So the location of wells is very important, and a 1999 USGS model showed that wells up gradient of the park could have the greatest effect on groundwater flow through the park. Okay, so pumping has more than doubled since 1980, and this has occurred while rainfall is steadily declining. And so the first graph is pumping, aquifer-wide pumping since 1980. This next graph shows rainfall at 2 rain gauges in West Hawaii or in the aquifer system. And this chart shows sea level in Hilo and at Kauai High. And so pumping has increased while rainfall is declining and while sea level is rising. All of these factors will exacerbate saltwater intrusion into the coastal aquifer system. And so climate researchers at the University of Hawaii have recommended that the Commission use designation as a tool to preserve groundwater flow as a natural defense against these changes. Okay, in our petition, we reference numerous studies that warn that groundwater withdrawals can adversely impact cultural and natural resources along the coast. This is a statement from one of those studies. This is from the University of Hawaii, and the authors warn that decreases in groundwater flow may significantly alter the chemical properties of coastal waters, endangering unique plants and animals with ecological, cultural, and economic value. Okay, and next I want to briefly, in the last few slides, just address why we cannot wait for adverse impacts to occur. As Jonathan mentioned, the most fundamental law for the National Park Service is the Organic Act. And it mandates that national parks preserve the wildlife, scenery, cultural and natural resources unimpaired for future generations. It means we cannot wait for these resources to be impacted. And National Park Service management policies, they require that resource managers, like superintendent, that they always seek ways to avoid or minimize, to the greatest extent practical, practicable adverse impacts on park resources. And this is because mitigation, waiting for an impact to occur and mitigating it, is very costly. And sometimes you can't mitigate an impact because it's irreversible. So impacts like species extinction can't be mitigated. And this is why we're advocating or proposing a forward-looking approach. We've asked the state and its political subdivisions to help preserve cultural natural resources and habitat for aquatic species before they are seriously affected. And we filed the petition in September, and as you've heard, the Commission has deferred a decision on whether to reject or accept the petition until December. And we think that you have the information you need now to continue the designation process or to support continuing it. There's nothing in the Water Code that says you have to wait for a crisis to occur before designating. The Water Code actually says the chairperson can designate when it is necessary or desirable from a water resource management perspective. If water resources may be threatened, then the Commission shall designate. And we think that you have the information now to consider this request and to further the investigation. Okay, that's the end of my talk. I have some slides at the end beyond this, and they were just supporting information in case questions come up, more detailed questions come up about specific wells or developments in the area of the park. And so I'll leave those until those questions come up. But thank you very much for your time and your attention to this important issue.
Okay. Before I open this up for council discussion, I just want to check, Tammy or John, did you have any final comments that you wanted to make? Are you good? Okay, thank you. Seoff, did you want to start the conversation?
Okay. Well, there's a lot to digest, but I just first wanted to thank you for bringing us down to the park, and thank you for your effort in this designation process. And thank you for the technical information and for the water law brief course. I think, notwithstanding some of the questions that we've heard already, I am struggling with how are we going to do this balancing act